Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate.
Have you ever wondered why the idea of God has always been tied to fear? What if what we call the divine is just the shadow of something infinitely greater? Something we've been trained not to see. There's a silent voice behind every belief, an ancient echo whispering that we've been deceived. Not out of malice, but convenience. The question was never who is God, but who taught us to believe what we believe. Since the first empires, we've been shaped to worship what enslaves us. We built thrones for the invisible, swore loyalty to entities that demand submission, and called it faith. A God who watches, punishes, and demands, while the true one remains hidden, like the sun behind a veil of smoke. They called him a monster for not bowing, a heretic for questioning, a madman for seeing. But what is madness if not the first step beyond the prison of the mind? The one who dares to doubt what everyone believes threatens the balance of a world built on fear. Fear is the invisible foundation of all obedience. Some say creation was a mistake, that the visible universe is an imperfect mirror of something pure, and that the craftsman who shaped it never realized he too was a creature. They gave this being many names. Some called him the demiurge, others, God. But the most dangerous of those names was precisely God, because when the Creator believes he is the Creator, the ultimate illusion is born, and humanity kneels before the reflection, not the source. The true sun never needed temples or laws. It simply shines silently within each of us. But man, blinded by his need for control, chose to build walls and crown fear. Thus, the sacred became a golden prison. The name of God was used as a sword, and the inner silence, the only doorway, was forgotten among rituals and dogmas. What if the original sin wasn't a fall, but an awakening? What if the serpent, cursed for revealing the truth, was the bearer of the lost spark? Maybe the mistake was never eating the fruit, but believing that knowledge was a crime. Since then, we've been taught to fear our own power and to call redemption the very thing that keeps us asleep. Now, something stirs. Fragments of that ancient wisdom rise again among ruins and forgotten symbols. Everything that was hidden wants to be remembered. What you're about to hear isn't a story. It's a mirror. And each word will be a key, a crack in the invisible wall that separates you from the one. But be careful. Once the veil falls, nothing will ever be the same. Since the beginning, there's been a silence before all things, a space between the before and the now, where time seems to hesitate and something watches. It's not a gaze from outside, but from within, as if the entire universe were breathing behind the eyes that behold it. There's a memory there, faint, almost forgotten, the feeling that nothing we believe is exactly what it seems. And it's in that instant, when thought tries to name the unnameable, that the crack opens. Everything we call God, truth, or order begins to dissolve, like sand slipping through our fingers. Because the name we learned to speak may have been only the echo of an older sound, the reflection of a light far greater than words can hold. We were taught to fear what we don't understand, and so we shape the sacred in the image of fear. We built temples not to remember, but to forget. We raised altars to control, crowned invisible judges, and called it faith. Meanwhile, the true principle, the one that doesn't demand, doesn't punish, doesn't show itself, waited in silence. Not in the heavens or in scriptures, but in the space between two thoughts, in the emptiness between what we are and what we pretend to be. That's where the real rests, calm, waiting for human noise to quiet enough to hear it. There's a moment when belief cracks, and through that crack, light seeps in. It hurts, because everything that seemed solid begins to crumble. The God who watches, who punishes, who demands sacrifice, starts to fall apart stone by stone inside consciousness. And in the place of fear, something indescribable emerges. Presence. Not a presence that dominates, but one that reveals. And in that revelation, there's vertigo. Because it doesn't tell us who we are, it only shows how much we've forgotten. The entire world becomes a metaphor for that distance between memory and forgetting, between what we were and what we've agreed to be. Awakening doesn't happen in a flash. It's slow, almost cruel. It comes as questions that echo within. What if everything I worshipped was my prison? What if the true sacred never asked for worship, but for awareness? With every answer, the ground gives way a little more, and a new layer of reality is revealed. The walls of the inner temple tremble, and the images painted for millennia in the collective mind begin to fade. The sound of collapse is soft, but final. The self that always wanted control finally sees it never had any. There's beauty in that collapse, because when everything falls, what's left is what's essential. Not the name, not the doctrine, not the certainty, but the invisible pulse that was always there. It's the memory that the spark we searched for outside was never far away. Pain, fear, guilt, they were only veils. And when they fall, what remains is the silence that has always held the universe together. In that silence, there are no dogmas, only breath, no hierarchy, only unity. But the ego fears dissolution. It clings to what's left, tries to rebuild the old God from the ruins. It creates new rules, new truths, new symbols. It calls enlightenment what's only repetition. And so, the cycle begins again, because the fear of freedom runs deeper than the desire for it. How many times must we fall to see that the fall was never the end, but the return? That the abyss we fear is only the mirror where the one contemplates itself? True awakening begins when we stop searching outward, when the gaze turns inward and realizes there's no inside or outside. Everything is the same movement, the same breath. Then a strange, almost contradictory feeling arises. The sense of coming home, even though you never left. It's like remembering something that was never forgotten, only covered up. And in that instant, the divine stops being an idea and becomes a state of presence. Every being carries the memory of the one. But that memory is fragile, easily erased by the voices that shout the loudest. Society built empires on forgetting, because remembering is dangerous. Those who remember don't obey. Those who remember don't fear. That's why awakening is always solitary, not for lack of company, but because the path is inward, and every inner journey is, in some way, a sacred act of disobedience. Matter, the body, the world, none of it is a prison. The prison is believing we're separate. When consciousness reunites with its source, reality becomes transparent. What once looked like chaos reveals harmony. What once was shadow shows itself as part of the light. Duality fades, not through denial, but through integration, and what remains is pure movement, to be without needing to mean. The return to the monad isn't a destination, it's a remembering, a gentle surrender to what has always been. No word can name that instant, because in it there's no subject, no object, only the pulse, the same pulse that vibrates in stars, in stones, in blood. The same pulse that once chose to forget, just to find itself again. And now, here, between what was and what's to come, it awakens, silently, inevitably. Everything that once slept in silence now beats. What once was shadow now reveals itself as the outline of the light that always waited to be seen. There's something irreversible in this moment, a kind of invisible reordering happening inside those who listen. The veil can't be replaced. The lie no longer finds shelter. The real calls, not with promises, but with presence. It's as if the whole universe breathes with you, reminding you that separation was never real, only the dream of a heart that feared its own infinity. And then, something changes. No angels, no thunder, only the subtle sound of consciousness expanding until it touches what's always been beyond. Every rigid belief melts away like mist, and in the space that's left, a clarity so pure arises it almost hurts. It's the reunion with the beginning, the silent return to the origin that never left. Everything that was said, every symbol, every image, now bows before the simplicity of what is. The one looks through you, and for the first time, you recognize it without fear. This is the point where awakening stops being theory and becomes experience. There's no unseeing what's been seen. The chains of old belief break, and in place of obedience, movement is born. You are the witness and the path, the reflection and the source. It's no longer about seeking, but about being. Time, once linear, becomes a circle, and destiny reveals itself as memory. What the world once called divine, you now feel pulsing in your heartbeat, in your gaze, in your breath. It's the same ancient fire, lit once again, gently burning away what was never real. Transformation doesn't ask permission. It just happens, like dawn breaking even when no one's watching. Let the mind resist. Let fear try to survive. Both will be swallowed by the vastness of what awakens. All that remains is truth, naked, absolute, incandescent. And in that clarity, there is no triumph or defeat, only the eternal instant recognizing itself in you. This is the miracle, realizing that what you were searching for outside has always been looking at you from within. Now, let the echo remain. Close your eyes, feel your body, sense what vibrates beyond words. That pulse, that's the calling, not to worship, but to remember. If something inside you stirred, if a spark was lit, don't let it fade. Share this awakening with those still asleep. Comment, share, subscribe to this circle of living remembrance, because every time a soul awakens, the entire universe recognizes itself once again.